everyone, welcome back. Today we're going to be making the crispiest cast iron chicken you've ever had. And I know I'm calling it cast iron chicken, but I'm not gonna actually be cooking in the cast iron chicken, even though I typically do. I'm gonna be using a stainless steel pan today so you guys can see better what I'm doing. The reason I love this dish is because it comes together in about 30 minutes, and we're gonna use the drippings to make a delicious pan sauce. And I know sauce is something that is very difficult to achieve on this diet, so let me show you guys how I do it. But first, for those of you who are new here, my name is Brittany. I'm a health coach and nutritionist, and my channel is all about helping you to create delicious low FODMAP meals to improve your digestive health. If you're into it, go ahead and subscribe for more low FODMAP recipe tutorials, as well as my tips and tricks for living a low FODMAP lifestyle. So, like I mentioned, this recipe is super quick. It comes together in about 30 minutes, but it does require a little bit of planning. Let me show you what I mean. Okay guys, see our chicken here? It's very dried out, this skin on the top, see? So what we did is we dry brine this chicken. And what that means is that we are going to coat both sides heavily in salt, and we're using that salt to draw out the moisture. So, and we're also, what's very important is to elevate it like this so that there's enough air to like circulate around it and really dry out the bottom. Because if you don't do that, if you just put these on a plate and the bottom is like just like on the bottom of the plate, then that's still gonna be like wet and it's gonna rot. And then this top part is gonna dry out, and you don't want that. So that's the reason we're able to leave this uncovered in the fridge for like 2, 3, even 4 days. It's because of the air circulation, right? And I know what you're thinking. Chicken uncovered in the fridge for 2, 3, 4 days? Is that even okay? It is, trust me, it's gonna be fine. As long as you salt it enough and it has like enough airflow, it's gonna be all right. So typically I will go to the store, come back, and then I will just prep these. I'll lay them out like this and salt them and just kind of leave them in there for a few days. And whenever I'm ready to cook them, they're perfect. The other thing that you could do, like maybe you came home from the store, dry brine them, and then you're like, oh shoot, I don't have enough time to make this. You can totally just throw them in the freezer, it's fine. Quick tip for you guys, if you don't have a cooling rack like this, I've seen lots of people take skewers like this and kind of set them out on a plate and use that to elevate their chicken, right? So it would be like this. You obviously can't put as much chicken as you could on this, but we could still fit like all 4 pieces on here. So yeah, if you don't have a drying rack or a cooling rack, try this. Another reason why I love to dry out these chickens, like it doesn't just make the skin super crispy, but what it does is it actually, I feel like it also makes it cook faster because so much energy is dedicated normally to just heating water and evaporating water out of your chicken. So if the water is already like gone, then it's gonna cook quicker. Okay, so first things first, let's preheat our oven to 375 degrees. Okay, so like I mentioned before, we are going to be using the drippings from this chicken to make a pan sauce. I typically like to use homemade bone broth for that, but I don't always have bone broth on me, which I'm sure sometimes you run out of bone broth too. So I'm gonna show you a shortcut of how to do that. As you've noticed, there are not a whole lot of convenience products and shortcuts on this diet because the main thing is to eat whole, real food, right? But I do have a couple of shortcuts for you today. We're going to be using our Fody chicken soup base and this beef gelatin from Vital Proteins. This is what's going to add the gelatin. Well, obviously it's adding gelatin to our faux homemade chicken stock, but you're gonna see it's gonna help to thicken our pan sauce and give it a much more nice like mouth feel. So you'll see later. We're also going to be using some fresh herbs. I have sage and thyme here today. I think they are a really nice combination for fall and winter. But you could really use any herb that you want, cilantro, parsley, dill, whatever. And then we're gonna be using a little bit of lemon. So you see, very simple, very few ingredients. Let's get started. Okay guys, while our oven is preheating, I'm gonna show you how to bloom our faux stock. So I'm gonna start with 1 cup of water. Okay, to that, I'm going to add 2 scoops of this beef gelatin. And I'm also going to add 1 teaspoon of our Fody chicken soup base. Okay, give it a little whisk. And now we're just gonna let it sit until we're ready for it. Okay. All right, guys, we have our stainless steel pan right here. Like I mentioned, I typically use cast iron, but you're gonna be able to see our pan sauce come together better with the stainless steel, so that's where I'm gonna use that today. You wanna make sure you're using something that is heat tolerant enough to be able to put in the oven. And you also don't want to use non-stick because, like you'll see, we want our chicken to stick to the pan a little bit. That's gonna develop something called fond, which is like the amazing like chicken bits that collect at the bottom of the pan. That's what we're gonna use to flavor our pan sauce, okay? So let's preheat this and get it nice and hot. I'm gonna start on high heat. I'm also gonna be adding a little bit of garlic oil, mostly for flavor. You wanna make sure not to put too much oil in your pan. You just wanna coat the bottom, because if you put too much oil, then you won't get like a good fond, and you actually won't get as good a sear, which I know sounds like weird, but it's true. I'm also choosing to use garlic oil, like I said, for flavor, but I'm gonna use a lighter oil since our chicken has skin on it. So this chicken skin has a lot of saturated fat. And remember, saturated fat is what is good for cooking at high temperatures. So since we have plenty of that, I'm just adding a little bit of garlic oil. Okay, so we're just gonna let this coat the pan, and we're gonna wait till it comes up to heat, till it's like shimmering. You'll see. Okay, you see how our oil is starting to move on its own a little bit? It's like shimmering, right? That's how we know it's ready. Okay. So now, right before I throw these into the pan, skin side down, I'm gonna hit them with just like a tiny bit of salt. Okay, maybe not a tiny bit, like a normal amount of salt. Okay, now we're also gonna turn the heat down to medium-high. And now we are gonna cook them like this for about 10 minutes. I'm also gonna throw a little bit more salt on the other side. So you guys have probably noticed that on this diet, you cannot eat processed food, right? And that's where all of the salt is, typically. Because you know how doctors are always like, watch the amount of salt in your diet, right? This is true when you're eating processed food, but when you're cooking all of your own food, don't be afraid of the salt. Salt is a necessary nutrient. Your body needs salt. Like animals would travel across the country like thousands of miles just to find salt, right? Like we need salt. The other thing that's important to remember about salt is that it's sodium chloride, right? And it's one of the main ingredients when it comes to making enough stomach acid, which is hydrochloric acid, right? So sodium chloride, hydrochloric acid. So make sure you're getting enough salt in your diet. It's also what is going to make your food taste good. So yeah, don't be afraid of salt. Typically I would put a grease guard on this so I don't make like a huge mess in the whole kitchen, but I want you guys to be able to see what I'm doing. So just a tip for when you're making it at home. I also apologize for my ugly chicken, but that's just what happened. Okay, see how we've developed some nice color on this skin, and look how crispy it looks already? That's exactly what we want. So this one got a little overcooked, that's okay. Same thing with this one. Okay, so we're not gonna flip them over yet, but what we are gonna do is we are going to pop these into the oven at 375 for 6 minutes. So while that's in the oven, I'm going to prep our herbs. So I'm just gonna pull some of this thyme off the stems. You don't really need to have like a solid measurement for these herbs. Put in as much as you like. I like a lot of flavor. I like a lot of fresh herbs, so I like to put a lot. Okay, so I think 2 sprigs should about do it. For the thyme, we're gonna do something a little bit different. I'm just gonna pluck off the leaves like this, and then we're gonna roll them up together and cut them like a chiffonade. I think I've showed you guys that before with like basil and stuff. Okay, so we're just gonna lay them on top of each other like this and then roll them up. And then we're gonna give them a quick slice. So you see how it makes like these nice little like ribbons? I love it. It just like feels fancy. Okay, so now we're just gonna put our herbs aside for when we are ready for making our sauce. And there's our timer. Okay, so let's check on these. Ooh, yes. Look at that, beautiful. Okay, so I want to actually let these cook on this side for 2 more minutes, and then we'll flip them. Okay, yes. This is the level of doneness that I'm looking for before we flip them. So now we are just going to flip these over and look at that amazing color. Okay, so now let's put these back in the oven for about 5 to 6 minutes. Ooh. Okay, so whenever I cook this, it always comes out to like 170, and like typically I like to pull my chicken at 160 because it's gonna keep rising after we take it out of the pan, right? But this one, since it's a lot of bone, there's a lot of chicken really close to the bone, I find that this amount of time is like perfect. Even if it's like a little past 160, it's fine because their thighs, they still come out super juicy. Okay, so now we're just gonna set these to the side while we make our pan sauce. Okay, so now you see all this amazing fat in the bottom of this pan. Okay, so it's fat and flavor. That's what we're gonna be using to make our pan sauce. So there is a little bit of fond here. Typically there is more, but I think that happens more when you start with chicken that's not so like dried out like we did. Doesn't matter, it's gonna be fine. So if you have more chicken bits, that's great. If you don't have a whole lot like me, it's fine, still gonna work. Okay, so we're gonna turn our heat onto a medium. Okay, so this is nice and hot again. We're gonna throw in our herbs. If you guys have never had fried sage, ooh, you're in for a treat. So we're just gonna fry this up a little bit. If you're using softer herbs like cilantro or parsley, you're gonna wanna throw them in later. But I really like fried sage, so that's why I'm throwing it in right now. Next, we're gonna add our stock. Look how thick it's gotten. So you see, once it heats up, it's not like super thick like that at all. Okay, so now we're just going to bring this up to a simmer, and we're going to evaporate the liquid that we just put in there, because that's how we concentrate the flavor. So you see it's starting to bubble. Adding the stock is also what is going to help loosen the fond or the chicken bits at the bottom of your pan. I didn't have very much, so So this is very similar to when we make bone broth, because you know how we like pressure cook it and then remove the lid and turn it on saute to kind of like let it reduce, and like we're concentrating the collagen in there. We're doing the same thing here. Okay, the simmering's getting a little aggressive for me, so I'm gonna turn down the heat just a little bit. It's very important to not cook too much water out of your pan sauce, because then it will break. Because we're basically mixing like fats and liquids together. They're like emulsified, right? If you cook out too much of the water, then it won't be emulsified anymore, and you'll see it starts to look like chunky. If that happens, just add a little bit more water, you're gonna be okay. Okay, so now I can feel at the bottom it's starting to get a little bit thick, which is perfect. That's exactly what we want. So that means at this point, I'm gonna add a little bit of acid. Today I'm gonna use half a lemon. Okay, now we're gonna give those sugars a chance to caramelize. So you see how at the bottom it's kind of like starting to stick to the pan a little bit? You can kind of see. That means the sugars are caramelizing and they're like sticking together. So we want to wait till this gets like a little bit thicker, and then we will finish it off by tasting for salt and pepper and whatever seasonings we want to put in there. And we will also finish it off with some butter. So you can also see how much our sauce has reduced. It started up here, and it's reduced by at least half. And I know it still seems like very liquidy now, but once we take this off the heat and it cools to room temperature, it's gonna get nice and like viscous and be more like a sauce. Okay, I think this is reduced enough for me, so let's turn off our heat and add our butter. I'm just adding about a tablespoon. See how it makes our sauce look nice and glossy and shiny? It's beautiful. Okay, so now I think I want to turn the heat back up a little bit. So I want it to coat the back of this spoon a little bit more. Okay, let's also taste for seasoning. So good. Does not need any more salt, but let's give it a little pepper. Okay, you see how it is sticking to the pan? Or it's like sticking together when we go through it? That's great. That's exactly what we want. So if you want your pan sauce thicker, you can keep going, you can keep reducing. For me, I want a good amount of sauce because I am gonna serve this over pasta, so I don't mind if it's a little, still a little like not as thick, you know what I mean? Because I want it to fully be able to coat the pasta. So yeah, that's reduced enough for me. Now let's go plate it up. Okay, so here we have our pan sauce. You see how it kind of has like a little skin on the top? Once we've taken it off the heat, perfect. That's the collagen. Okay, so you can plate this up with whatever veggie and starch that you have that you want to eat. That's also low FODMAP. I have some leftover gluten-free pasta that I'm gonna use. So yeah, let me just go warm this up really quick. All right, guys, I just have a little pasta here that I've warmed up. Throw a little of our pan sauce on there. All right, guys, this is my favorite part of this chicken. Check it out. See how crispy that skin is? Oh my God, so psyched. All right, let's take a bite. my God. So good. Crispy, juicy, full of flavor. Amazing. You want some? Let me get another piece here so you guys can see the inside, just how like juicy it is. See how nice and juicy that looks? Oh, it's perfect. So good. There you go. Ain't that good? You want more? Is it good? You want more? You have to eat your dog food. All right, let's take a bite of these noodles and taste our sauce. Oh. Yes, so good. I love sage. Like sage is such an amazing herb for fall and winter. Freaking love it. And you'll notice that our pan sauce really coats the noodles, and that's because we added the gelatin. If we didn't, if we just used water and Fody chicken soup base, then you just wouldn't have this nice like sauce that like coats the noodles or potatoes, quinoa, rice, whatever you want to serve this with. I also love doing a lemon herb sauce because it goes with like everything. So yeah. And I know these chickens over here like came out a little bit darker on top, but they're still so good and so juicy. You see how there's still like juice collecting in the bottom? They're not gonna be dry at all, so don't worry about it. All right guys, there you have it. Crispy cast iron chicken in about 30 minutes with a delicious pan sauce that you can put on anything from gluten-free pasta to rice, mashed potatoes, quinoa, whatever you want. Please like this video if you found it useful. If you plan on making this, let me know in the comments below how it came out. I really love to see you guys making my recipes, and when you tag me on Instagram, I love it. And then I will also leave a link down below for my Patreon if you guys want to go ahead and support me there. I am thinking of doing a live stream for my patrons soon, so I'll keep you guys posted on that. Yeah, I think that's it. So thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you next time.